Welcome to Buddha's Healing, a gentle space where we quietly reflect on the wisdom of the Buddha and learn how to care for the heart. Calm the mind and rediscover peace in every season of life. Dear friends, there comes a season of life after 60 when many people quietly begin saying something they do not fully understand. I feel tired all the time, not just physically, something deeper. A different kind of tired, the kind sleep does not always fix, the kind rest does not always solve, the kind difficult to explain. Perhaps some people listening today understand this feeling deeply. You sleep, yet still feel drained. You rest, yet still feel emotionally heavy. Small things suddenly feel harder. Simple worries somehow feel bigger. Patience grows shorter. Joy feels quieter, and perhaps, without fully realizing it, the mind has simply become tired. Please hear this gently. There is nothing weak about emotional exhaustion. Nothing shameful, nothing broken, because after 60, life often becomes emotionally heavier in ways younger people do not always see. The heart carries more history, more memories, more loss, more disappointment, more responsibility, more grief, more silent worry. Sometimes, the mind quietly spends years holding things together, trying to stay strong, trying not to burden anyone, trying to keep moving forward, until one day, something inside quietly whispers, I am tired. Not dramatic exhaustion, just quiet tiredness, the kind no one else notices, the kind hidden behind polite smiles. Daily routines, ordinary conversations, and perhaps one of the hardest parts, many people simply assume, maybe this is just aging. But dear friends, please hear this gently. Not every kind of tiredness comes from age. Sometimes, the body feels exhausted because the mind has quietly been carrying too much for too long. Invisible things, emotional things, heavy things, worry, loneliness, overthinking, regret, unspoken grief. The pressure to stay strong, and because emotional exhaustion builds slowly, many people no longer notice how tired they have truly become. Today, we are going to gently reflect on 7 quiet signs your mind may be emotionally tired after 60. And the gentle wisdom of the Buddha that softly guides the heart back toward healing. Not to create fear, not to diagnose, not to judge, but to understand, because understanding creates compassion. And compassion creates healing. Together, we will gently explore signs such as feeling tired even after rest, becoming irritated more easily, thinking too much at night, feeling disconnected from joy, quietly withdrawing from others, reliving old regret, and perhaps most importantly, feeling emotionally heavy without fully understanding why. Please hear this gently. This reflection is not about fixing yourself. You are not broken. This is simply about listening. Listening to what the mind may have quietly been trying to say for years. Because perhaps emotional healing after 60 begins not with pushing harder. Perhaps healing begins with softening. Slowing down, breathing deeper, carrying less. The Buddha gently reminded people. Suffering grows when the mind carries too much without awareness. And perhaps, awareness quietly begins with one honest question. What has my mind been carrying lately? Because, dear friends, sometimes the mind does not need more pressure. Sometimes it simply needs kindness. So before we continue, take one slow breath, let your shoulders soften, and gently ask yourself, am I tired, or is my mind quietly asking for rest? Because sometimes the deepest exhaustion is the kind no one else can see. Dear friends, let us gently begin with the first quiet sign your mind may be emotionally tired after 60, something many people quietly dismiss. without realizing how deeply it affects peace. And that sign is, you feel tired even after resting. At first, this can feel confusing because physically, perhaps nothing seems terribly wrong. You sleep, you rest, you spend quiet time at home, you even try slowing down. And yet somehow, the tiredness remains, not dramatic exhaustion, just heaviness, the kind difficult to explain, the kind that quietly follows you through ordinary days. Simple tasks feel harder, motivation feels lower, the heart feels slower somehow, and perhaps many people quietly whisper to themselves, "Why am I still so tired?" Please hear this gently. Sometimes the body feels tired because the mind has quietly been carrying too much for too long. Invisible things, emotional things, unfinished grief, quiet loneliness, worry, fear, regret, silent pressure. And dear friends, the nervous system listens to emotional burden, the body listens, sleep listens, even peace listens. Because emotional heaviness quietly asks energy from us every single day, especially after 60. When the mind often carries decades of emotional history. Today, we gently reflect on something important. Could tiredness sometimes be emotional, not only physical? The Buddha gently reminded people again and again. The suffering we carry inside quietly shapes how life feels outside. Fear feels heavy. Unspoken grief feels heavy. Worry feels heavy. Holding too much feels heavy. And perhaps many people after 60 quietly underestimate how exhausting emotional carrying truly becomes. Some people wake up tired not because sleep failed, but because the mind never truly rested, even during sleep. The worries continued, the overthinking continued, the emotional tension quietly remained. How often does this happen? The body lies safely in bed, yet the mind quietly wanders. What if my health changes? What if something happens to family? What if life gets harder? What if I made mistakes? What if, and slowly, the nervous system grows tired. Very tired, because dear friends, a mind always preparing for emotional danger rarely finds deep rest. Emotionally healthy people over 60 slowly begin learning something important. Rest is not only sleep. Rest is emotional softness too. Less fear, less gripping, less replaying, less emotional carrying. Imagine carrying invisible bags all day. Worry, fear, loneliness, regret, pressure. At first, perhaps you barely notice. But after enough time, everything feels heavier. Walking feels harder, thinking feels harder, rest feels less effective. Dear friends, sometimes emotional exhaustion quietly disguises itself as aging. People simply say, "I guess I am getting older," but perhaps the mind has quietly been asking for something deeper: compassion, stillness, gentleness, a chance to stop carrying quite so much. Please hear this gently. You are allowed to rest emotionally. You are allowed softer expectations. You are allowed quiet moments. You are allowed healing, especially after 60. Because peace matters deeply now, and perhaps tonight, before sleep, you may gently place a hand over your heart. Take one slow breath and quietly whisper, "I have carried enough for today. My mind deserves rest too." Sometimes, healing begins this softly: one slower breath, one gentler thought, one quieter evening inside the heart. There was a man named George. He was 66 years old, living in a quiet neighborhood outside Minneapolis. If you asked anyone about George, they would probably say the same thing. He's doing fine, retired, healthy enough, still active, a good man. Nothing seemed obviously wrong, and honestly, George often said the same thing himself. "I am okay," but quietly, Something inside felt different for nearly a year. He had felt tired all the time. Not dramatic tiredness, just heaviness. The kind difficult to explain. He slept, yet woke up tired. Took naps, still felt drained. Simple errands felt strangely exhausting. Even hobbies he once enjoyed felt harder to care about. At first, George blamed age. Well, I am getting older, but deep down, something about the tiredness felt different. More emotional somehow, though he rarely admitted that. His wife, Linda, quietly noticed first, one evening while washing dishes. She gently asked, "You seem tired lately." George laughed softly. "I am 66, that is how this works." But Linda stayed quiet, then softly asked, "No, are you tired or are you carrying something?" The question lingered. Because honestly, he did feel like he was carrying something, he just did not know what. Weeks passed. The heaviness remained. Late at night, his mind rarely rested, thoughts quietly replayed, worries about retirement money, fear about future health, regret about missed time with family, questions about purpose, the strange uncertainty of aging. And though nothing terrible had happened, something inside always felt emotionally busy. One afternoon during a routine doctor's appointment, the doctor gently asked, "How is your energy?" George sighed. "Tired," the doctor nodded. "Sleeping okay?" "Mostly." The doctor paused, then softly asked, "How are you emotionally?" George laughed awkwardly. "Emotionally?" The doctor smiled kindly. "Yes. Sometimes people your age are not physically exhausted, sometimes they are emotionally exhausted." The phrase stayed with him. Emotionally exhausted, because somehow it felt painfully accurate. Weeks later, at Linda's encouragement, George reluctantly joined a mindfulness class at a local wellness center. Normally, he would never have gone. Too quiet, too unfamiliar, too emotional, but something inside quietly felt tired enough to try. One afternoon, the teacher softly said, "The mind becomes tired when it carries too much for too long." George sat very still. Then came another sentence, a sentence that somehow landed directly inside him. "Rest is not only sleep." Sometimes rest means putting emotional burdens down. Something shifted, because suddenly, George realized something difficult. He had not truly rested in years, even when sitting still. His mind worried, planned, prepared, overthought, quietly carried, and somehow, the emotional weight had become normal. That night, George sat quietly on the back porch. No television, no distractions, just silence and honesty. For the first time in years, he quietly admitted something to himself. "I am tired, not physically, emotionally, deeply emotionally, and strangely." The honesty felt relieving. Because finally, the tiredness had words. Slowly, things began changing, not dramatically, not perfectly, just gently. He stopped watching stressful news late at night, walked more slowly, talked more openly with Linda, practiced quiet breathing before sleep, stopped demanding so much from himself. Little by little, the heaviness softened. Not disappeared, but softened. Months later, Linda smiled over morning coffee. "You seem lighter lately." George laughed softly. "I think I finally stopped pretending I had endless energy." Then after a pause, he quietly added, "And maybe I finally started listening to what my mind was trying to tell me." Dear friends, perhaps there is a George somewhere inside many of us. Someone quietly tired, someone resting, yet never truly resting. Please hear this gently. Not all tiredness comes from age. Sometimes, the mind has simply carried too much for too long, and perhaps healing begins not by pushing harder, but by softening, resting, breathing. Speaking honestly, because dear friends, Your mind deserves compassion too, especially after 60. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, what emotional weight have I quietly normalized? What has my mind been carrying? Because sometimes, the deepest healing begins with one honest whisper, I am tired and I deserve rest too. If today's reflection touched your heart, please subscribe to Buddha's Healing and continue walking this journey of mindfulness, healing, and inner peace with us. And if you have quietly felt emotionally tired lately, perhaps leave a gentle comment below. Sometimes healing begins when we realize we are not carrying the heaviness alone. Dear friends, let us gently move into the second quiet sign. Your mind may be emotionally tired after 60, something many people quietly notice, but rarely understand. And that sign is, small things irritate you more than before. At first, this can feel confusing because perhaps you were once patient, calm, steady, able to let little things go, but lately something feels different. Small inconveniences suddenly feel heavier, noise feels more irritating, minor problems feel strangely overwhelming. A delayed phone call, a messy room, traffic, technology problems, someone speaking impatiently, a forgotten errand. Things that once seemed manageable somehow feel emotionally bigger, and afterward, many people quietly ask themselves, why did that upset me so much? Please hear this gently. Irritability is not always anger. Sometimes irritability is exhaustion wearing a different face. The Buddha gently reminded people that suffering quietly changes how the mind responds. A tired mind becomes less spacious, less patient, more emotionally sensitive, not because someone has become difficult, not because someone is failing, but because emotional energy quietly grows smaller when too much has been carried for too long. Especially after 60, when life often feels emotionally heavier, more memories, more loss, more uncertainty, more responsibility, more invisible emotional carrying. And perhaps, what looks like irritation is sometimes the heart softly whispering, I am overwhelmed. Today, we gently reflect on something important. Could irritation sometimes be emotional tiredness asking for compassion? The Buddha often taught about awareness, awareness of the mind, awareness of emotion, awareness of suffering before suffering quietly takes over, because often people misunderstand themselves. Someone says, I am becoming impatient. I don't feel like myself. Everything annoys me lately. But dear friends, sometimes the truth is gentler than self-judgment. Sometimes the mind is simply tired, emotionally overloaded, quietly overstretched. Imagine carrying emotional weight for years. Worry, fear, grief, pressure, loneliness, regret. Then imagine trying to stay endlessly patient on top of all that. Eventually, something softens. Or rather, something thins. The emotional space between stress and reaction becomes smaller. And suddenly, little things feel larger than they truly are. Emotionally healthy people slowly begin learning something compassionate. Irritation is often information, not failure, not weakness. Information, a signal, a whisper from the nervous system saying, please slow down, please rest, please stop carrying so much. Imagine holding a glass already filled almost to the top. Even one extra drop causes overflow. The problem is not the drop. The problem is how full the glass already feels. Dear friends, sometimes small things upset us more because emotionally, we are already carrying too much. Too much worry, too much loneliness, too much mental noise, too much quiet sadness. Please hear this gently. You are not broken for feeling more sensitive. You are not becoming too emotional. Perhaps Your mind has simply been trying to stay strong for too long, and perhaps after 60, the invitation becomes softer. Not pushing harder, not criticizing yourself more, but becoming gentler, more compassionate, more honest. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, what has my heart quietly been carrying lately? Am I truly angry or simply tired? Because sometimes, healing begins not by fixing the reaction. Sometimes, healing begins by caring for the exhaustion underneath it. There was a woman named Nancy. She was 64 years old, living with her husband, Michael, in a quiet town outside Oregon. For most of her life, Nancy had been known as patient, warm, easygoing, the kind of person who rarely lost her temper. Friends often said, Nancy is always calm, and honestly, for many years that felt true, but lately, something had changed, quietly, gradually, and in ways she did not fully understand. Little things suddenly irritated her. The dishwasher not loaded correctly, a phone call interrupting dinner, loud television, slow drivers. Technology problems, even simple questions sometimes felt strangely exhausting, and afterward, Nancy often felt confused. Why did that bother me so much? That is not who I am. One afternoon, Michael accidentally dropped groceries in the kitchen. A carton of eggs cracked across the floor. Normally, Nancy would have laughed, but this time, something inside snapped. Oh, for goodness sake. Her voice came out sharper than expected. Michael froze, quietly surprised. Nancy froze too, because honestly, she startled herself. A few minutes later, standing alone in the bathroom, she quietly cried, not because of the eggs, because something felt wrong. She whispered softly, "What is happening to me?" Weeks passed, the irritability stayed. Some mornings, she woke up already tense, already emotionally tired. Small inconveniences somehow felt too big. Then one afternoon, her daughter Claire came over for coffee. Halfway through the visit, Claire gently asked, "Mom, you okay lately?" Nancy forced a smile, of course. But Claire stayed quiet, then softly said, "You seem overwhelmed." The word lingered, overwhelmed, because somehow that felt painfully accurate. Later that evening, Nancy sat quietly in the living room, no television, no distractions, just honesty, and suddenly, she realized something difficult. She had been carrying more than she admitted. Her mother's declining health, financial worries, fear about getting older, loneliness she had not fully named, the quiet sadness of children living farther away, and underneath everything, a deep tiredness, not physical, emotional. Weeks later, at the encouragement of a friend, Nancy joined a mindfulness class at a local community center. One afternoon, the teacher quietly said, "Irritation is often sadness wearing armor." Nancy sat very still. Then came another sentence, a sentence that somehow landed directly inside her chest. Sometimes we are not angry, sometimes we are simply exhausted. Something softened immediately, because suddenly, Nancy stopped blaming herself, stopped calling herself difficult, stopped assuming something was wrong. Instead, she quietly began asking, "What hurts underneath this?" Slowly, things changed, not dramatically, not perfectly, just gently. She rested more, said no more often, took quiet walks, stopped demanding so much emotional strength from herself, talked more honestly with Michael, allowed herself softer days. And strangely, the irritability softened, not overnight but little by little. Months later, Michael smiled one evening while cooking dinner. "You seem more peaceful lately." Nancy laughed softly. "I think I finally realized I wasn't angry. I was tired, and somehow, that understanding changed everything." Dear friends, Perhaps there is a Nancy somewhere inside many of us, someone feeling more irritated lately, someone quietly wondering, why do little things upset me now? Please hear this gently. You are not failing. You are not becoming difficult. You are not broken. Sometimes the mind has simply carried too much. For too long, an emotional tiredness quietly speaks through impatience, sensitivity, overwhelm, irritation. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, what exhaustion has been quietly living underneath my reactions? What does my heart need right now? Because sometimes, healing begins not with judging ourselves. Sometimes, healing begins with compassion for the tiredness underneath it all. Dear friends, as we gently come to the end of today's reflection, perhaps the most important truth to carry into the heart is this: not all tiredness is physical. Sometimes, the deepest exhaustion lives quietly inside the mind, hidden, unspoken, invisible to everyone else, and perhaps even invisible to ourselves for a very long time. Today, we gently reflected on quiet signs the mind may be emotionally tired after 60, feeling tired even after resting, feeling more irritated by small things, overthinking late at night, quiet sadness, emotional heaviness, the strange feeling that joy somehow feels farther away, not because anyone is weak, not because something is wrong, but because the heart and mind after 60 often carry more than others realize. More memories, more responsibility, more grief, more uncertainty, more invisible emotional history. Please hear this gently. You are not weak for feeling emotionally tired. You are not failing. You are not broken. Because life after 60 asks much from the heart. It asks people to adapt, to grieve, to let go, to keep loving, to keep hoping, even after disappointment, even after loss. And dear friends, that quiet emotional effort matters. The Buddha gently reminded people again and again. The mind suffers when it carries too much without awareness. Fear quietly grows, worry quietly grows, overthinking quietly grows, and eventually, the spirit grows tired, very tired. But perhaps healing begins the moment we stop judging the tiredness and begin listening to it instead, because emotional exhaustion is not weakness. Sometimes, it is wisdom quietly asking for gentleness, for slower days, for softer expectations, for less carrying, for deeper rest. And perhaps after 60, one of the deepest forms of wisdom sounds something like this: I no longer need to push through everything. I deserve kindness too. My mind deserves rest. Please hear this gently. Rest is not laziness. Softness is not weakness. Slowing down is not failure. Sometimes, slowing down is healing. Sometimes stillness is healing. Sometimes, one honest conversation is healing. One quiet breath, one peaceful evening, one gentler expectation. Little by little, the tired mind begins softening, like winter slowly releasing into spring. Not instantly, not dramatically, just quietly, steadily, with patience. Dear friends, perhaps tonight, before sleep, you may place a hand gently over your heart, take one slow breath, and quietly ask yourself, what has my mind quietly been carrying? What pressure no longer belongs to me? What would emotional rest feel like? Because sometimes, healing begins not by becoming stronger. Sometimes, healing begins the moment we softly whisper, I am tired, and I deserve peace too. If today's reflection brought even a small sense of comfort, please subscribe to Buddha's Healing and continue walking this journey of mindfulness, healing, and inner peace with us. And if your heart or mind has quietly felt tired lately, perhaps gently share it in the comments. Sometimes healing begins the moment we realize we are not carrying life alone. May your thoughts grow quieter, may your heart grow softer, and may peace slowly return to you, one gentle breath at a time.